Hi, welcome to Five Star Conversations, where we talk to hoteliers that are having an impact on the hospitality industry. Today, I'm joined by Mark Hodge. Welcome, Mark.
Yeah, good afternoon. How you doing, Brendan?
Really good, thanks, Mark. Mark, for the viewers, I'm just going to give them a quick highlight on your amazing 30-year career. And then what I'll do is I'll get you to fill in the first 15 years or so. And we'll actually put your bio in the speaker notes as well. But so here we go. So Mark has an extraordinary career in hospitality and tourism spanning more than 30 years. Most recently, Mark commenced with Star Entertainment Group as the new general manager of hotel and residences based at the Gold Coast. In this role, Mark oversees the Star Grand and the Darling, so the existing hotels, and the newly established Star Residences. Prior to that, Mark was with the Mantra Group for just over 12 years, I think it was, as Group General Manager for Mantra Resorts, Hotels and Apartments. With the sale of Mantra to Accor in 2018, Mark took on the role as Senior Vice President of Operations with Accor, and that role encompassed full operational responsibility across four brands being Art Series, Peppers, Mantra, and BreakFree. Now, these were under the Accor Hotels Apartments and Leases banner, which I think is a bit of a mouthful. There were 140 properties that Mark was responsible for across Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, and Hawaii. Mark reported directly to the CEO of Accor, and he was also part of Accors Pacific Executive Committee. Mark has also given back to the industry via a number of board positions, including past director of the National Board of Accommodation Association of Australia and past regional chairman for the Hotel, Motel and Accommodation Association. Mark was also previously a board member and director for Destination Gold Coast. Most recently, Mark has been appointed as a chairman of the Accommodation Association Queensland State Advisory Board. Welcome again, Mark. Since I've sort of known you, it's been Mantra and Accor, but I'm sure there's a lot before that. And I think I mentioned to you off camera, I always find sometimes we forget, we see a person in it, who's in a very senior level, and we somehow think that they sort of woke up one day and just took on that position, but it's never the case. They always started somewhere. So if you could fill us in a little bit or tell us a little bit about your early career, that'd be great, Mark.
Yeah, sure. Look, and it's really interesting, having this conversation with you now. It's only just a weekend just went by that I went back for the first time to a little country motel that my mum and dad built 40 years ago.
Wow.
And that was in a place called Bellingen.
Oh, yeah.
And my dad was in his early 40s, and he had this dream to build a motel, living in Sydney, moving to the country, building this motel and operate it. And my mum was a chef. So that's how, I remember probably from the age of, 10 to 16,
Yep.
We were living behind reception. My mum was cooking in the kitchen every night. My dad was, working as a builder through the day and then operating the bar at night. And it just became a way of life, that living, within hospitality.
And did you have a role? Were you sort of, doing dishes in the kitchen and acting as a waiter in the restaurant?
Yeah, look, first off, as I got old enough to, actually, I was working in the kitchen, helping my mum. And then, once I got older enough to actually get behind the bar, I loved that. But at the same time, I remember my dad being a builder, he also encouraged me to actually, why don't you actually do an apprenticeship as a carpenter?
Okay.
So I undertook my apprenticeship with his company. I enjoyed it, but I never loved it, Brendan.
Yep.
And when I'd work at night in the bar, after working the day on the tools, I loved the bar, and I loved the bar because I actually could talk to people.
Yep.
And I realized that I had more love for that than what I had with my nail bag and when I was building. And that's what really migrated me, is that I became more and more interested and more enjoyable about the nighttime experience than the day. I finished my trade, but I remember saying to my dad this time that, this one day, I said, Dad, look, I know you've always wanted me to follow in your footsteps, take over your business as a builder.
Yeah.
I'd rather take over, the keys of the hotel.
Okay. How did that go down?
Yeah, well, I remember running my first country motel in a place called Glen Innes.
Oh, yes, yes.
And
Yeah,
my dad and I had worked on, we bought it, we did it up, and then we were running it. And my dad said to me, I just turned, 19, son, I think you're ready. And he left me to run this motel in Glen Innes. And for the next 12 months, I think I had the most incredible learning experience, is what I would say,
Yep, yep.
about probably of all of the things to do, but also how not to do things.
And you just learned on your own? Did you have anyone mentoring you?
No, I learned some from my dad, but then I was on my own, and
Wow.
I quickly learned about respecting others. I also learned about asking for advice. I also learnt through they call it the school of hard knocks, and
Yep.
making poor decisions, and ones that impacted not only the guest experience, but also the financial results that we weren't achieving. So I did that for about a year, and then I decided that I was just too young and it was all too much pressure, and I was going to travel around Australia.
Yep.
So I was with my partner at the time. We jumped in a camper van, and that's when we headed to Cairns, and we expressed our way up to there, and that was in the late 80s, early 90s. And that was when North Queensland was booming.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember starting as a receptionist in a place called the Cairns Colonial Club.
Oh, wow. Yeah, okay.
And it was built by an entrepreneur up there. And we had 281 rooms, and it had restaurants and bars. And I worked there for 9 years, and I worked in every role throughout that resort until I was the resort manager, the 2IC. We ended up working for the Japanese. It was bought by a Japanese hotel group, and I had a great experience of working and being trained and really growing across every aspect of that business until I left after 9 years, and I got offered my first GM gig, and went and opened up a brand new property not far from there.
Okay. Wow. Isn't that interesting? Cairns Colonial Club. I worked for a PMS vendor in the 90s, and we provided the PMS to that property. I remember, I never got to visit, but I do remember taking calls from the property from a support point of view. So
yeah. Look, it was they were heady days, Brendan, and Cairns was booming. The Americas, the English, the Europeans. It was such a big market. Quicksilver going out to the reef was running 4 massive big boats.
yeah.
They were heady times, and we had lots of new hotels. We had, Port Douglas was really emerging at that stage with the Sheraton. And so we're going through a massive growth trajectory. And my time up there was I really loved it because I got to work in the bars and the restaurants. We opened a new convention center at the back, and that's where I really grew and cut my teeth on that. And So I worked there. I worked around at Palm Royale. That was our my first GM role, and we opened that and we operated that for 4 or 5 years. And then I decided I needed to go to the big smoke, and I went to Melbourne, and I was group GM of a property called Apartments of Melbourne, and that was it was an emerging business where it was doing what basically we did in Manta Group, and that was secure the letting rights of individual apartments and put them under a brand and commercialize them and go out to market. And that's what we did. And we had 6 locations that very much focused on the corporate market. It was a boutique offering, South Yarra, in the city, Fitzroy Street, St Kilda. And we built a brand, and we built a small business that became very popular. And I did that for nearly 5 years, and then decided that I wanted to get back to North Queensland. And so I moved back, and there was a development company at the time that was building a very large resort, again, all strata titled, and it was going to be the largest layered scheme in Queensland at the time, 18 different body corporates.
Wow.
Over 11 acres, and that was the Lakes Cairns Resort and Spa. And again, we opened that, 380 rooms or apartments. We had such success in that And I did that for nearly 5 years as well. And then a guy that I knew from Cairns, who was working at Mirvac at the time, head of development, a guy by the name of Bob East, who you would know.
Yep.
And Bob encouraged me to think about joining him down on the Gold Coast.
Yep.
And he just started as the COO of what was to become, what was Stella at the time, and what was later to become Mantra Group.
Yep.
And so I remember flying down, having a coffee with Bob, and he was telling me about, this opportunity to actually grow what was, the Peppers portfolio and BreakFree. And there was a view to grow another brand, which was going to be called Mantra. And whilst it was predominantly Queensland based, we wanted to take it national, and we had aspirations to go global.
Wow.
And I was Bob's first appointee to go on the executive. And and then it was enormous growth. We bought Outrigger, we bought Pacific International, we bought SA, we bought Seville, all these brands that probably a lot of people may have known back in the day. And we melted them down basically under 4 brands, and that included the Art Series Group.
Yes.
And then over those next 15 years, we grew to 140 properties, New Zealand, Australia, Indonesia, and our last one was in Hawaii.
Wow. So Mantra was the second largest hotel group, literally just a little bit of number of property-wise below Accor at the time, I think.
Yeah, that's right. And look, it was a really interesting time because we got to that size, that capability, and we were owned by private equity. And right. They were very good to work with. They had such a growth trajectory in their mind, and they were going to take us there. And lots of highs and lows over those years, but we managed to get to a point where we floated. And I remember that day very clearly when we listed on the ASX, and we had great support throughout that over those next couple of years. And it was at that point that I think, we were very, we were growing, continued to grow. We were, initially we were thought of the guys on the Gold Coast and White Shoe Brigade up here, and no one was going to take us too seriously. And I remember, Brendan, going along to, I tell this story about going along to the HM Awards every year.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And, in the first 5 years of being with Mantra Group, we'd go and we'd turn up and we'd win nothing. But we kept turning up. And it was like years 6, 7, 8, 9 that we started to pick up a few individual hotel awards. And then I think we got to our 10th year, and we started picking up, quite a lot. And that's a thing at that point, people started to take us more seriously. And then, hit 15 years, we're on the ASX. We had an incredible team of people that I worked alongside. And I remember we started getting tapped, by pretty much all of the global groups started showing interest in us. And that's when the conversation started in the inspections that I was asked to take of various groups that were looking at, potentially, an acquisition of the Mantra Group.
That's an amazing story. When you came on board with that conversation with Bob, as you said, you were one of the first on the committee. How many properties were part of Stella at that point in time?
Look, I think, from memory, we might have had around about 50.
Okay.
And that was BreakFree, which is your budget, your value brand. That was Peppers, that had been that boutique brand, had some, nice properties, but not a lot of big stuff, a lot of small stuff.
Yep.
And there was about 5 or 6 that they thought they were better than BreakFree, but they didn't have a brand. So this is where Mantra was formed.
Yeah, that's incredible. Great success story. Just picking up on the Accor thing, you mentioned to me pre-interview that someone who inspires you was Simon McGrath when you got to work with him. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, look, prior to Simon, over these 15 years, I had various mentors. Bob East, was certainly a mentor. He was our CEO. He was also, and still is, a very close friend. So, he taught me a lot. Another guy by the name of Thomas Johnson.
Yep.
Thomas and I worked very closely together. I also ended up working for Thomas as the COO on stage. And so those 2 guys were inspirational in those formative years as a leader. But then when I got into, when we stepped away from the ASX, Accor acquired us for, I think at the time about 1.2 billion. And I remember going through a process with the acquisition that Accor were deciding on how they were going to approach, the integration. And I remember I knew Simon from years ago living in Cairns when he was, regional up in that part of the world. And so I remember sitting with Simon and he was, asking me what I want to do. You've been with Mantra Group for that long. Have you still got some puff in you? What are your aspirations? What do you want? And at that stage, I knew that there was going to be significant change with the executive. I knew that the chance of Bob moving through would not happen, unlikely. I think, Thomas was probably unlikely. And I was, probably half the executive were going to move on. So I was really honest with Simon at the time. And I remember this conversation really clearly. And I said, look, I still love this company. I'm very close to the people that work in here. A lot of them are like family to me. But I've got to feel as though I'm going to be able to offer value, and I've got to feel that I'm going to be able to make a difference. And I remember Simon, really, and we talked about what's important to me. And what's important to me is also the values of the organisation and the culture. What was important about the next step for me, if it was going to be with Accor, is I needed to understand what was the view and the future for Mantra Group, and wanting to understand the culture and the values of Accor, and we really talked at length about that. And at the end of that conversation, I was really comfortable with what Simon was talking about and the role that he thought that I maybe play. And that, forward a couple of weeks on from there, he announced the new structure, and he offered me the Senior Vice President of Operations for what was Mantra Group, and that was basically, running what was the old Mantra Group within the new Accor framework.
Wow, that's very cool. Obviously, one of the questions was, if you could put anything on a T-shirt, what would it be? And you said Carpe Diem. So we did that, and I was just curious, why Carpe Diem? What does that mean to you, and where does that sort of come from?
Well, for me, it's, it obviously, as we understand, it means seize the day. And, and what I've learned, I think, over my life, Brendan, is that, and I've had various things that have happened in my life that have made me appreciate more the people around me, what I love doing, which is obviously this industry, and I love working with people, and I love the craft of hospitality. And, and I think to me, it's about actually making every day count. So seizing the day is really something that I wake up each day and I just go, right, I want to make a difference in something. And so being a good leader, being a good father, being a good partner, they're the sorts of things that I consciously choose. And we were talking earlier about Simon McGrath, and so what I learned from Simon, and again, you get to my stage in life, Brendan, and you've had a lot of people that have influenced your career. You've worked with an incredible, various leaders that have inspired you in various ways. The one of the things that stands out that I learned from Simon was to be comfortable about vulnerability as a leader. And I always questioned about leadership, and in my earlier career, and whether I needed to be steadfast and out front and sometimes outspoken. And what Simon taught me was the ability to make sure that everyone felt comfortable, that everyone was attentive, but also that if he didn't know something, or if he felt like there was a different way of approaching it that would get the same message across, he'd explore that. And he spent, Accor, I love, one of the things about Accor I also love is about the art of human connection. And when I first started, Simon was talking about that and about the hardest program. And I got to say, when I first heard about it, I initially thought maybe it's just really great marketing. But then when I went through it, Brendan, it's a whole lot more than that. And what I also loved about Simon is that he lived and breathed it in regards to that human connection. And we would go into properties when I was first started, and we'd be doing, visits to various hotels. And I remember going into an Accor hotel somewhere, it was in Sydney, I think. And everyone we arrived in the car on the way to this hotel, and an age just started within weeks, and everyone seemed to be lined up out the front of the hotel. And I thought, wow, this is a bit over the top, like this. And what I quickly worked out, Brendan, is that people were doing it not because they were in fear of Simon arriving.
Yeah.
They were there to respect the man.
Yep.
And they wanted to talk to him and say hello to him.
Right.
And what I quickly learned was that it was respect and engagement that he was able to achieve, and through his leadership and that vulnerability and that genuine level of care, that really changed my perspective on my leadership style, and it reinforced what I thought was powerful and real. It reinforced that and underlined it.
I love that. I've heard Scott Boys on his podcast with Grant Altron talk a lot about vulnerability, and I think I've learned that, but I grew up in a family where it was a stoic upbringing, so to speak,
Yeah.
and you get taught not to show vulnerability.
Correct.
And it's it's something that we have to unlearn, I think. And there's probably that expectation as well that if you're running Accor, you've got all the answers. It's like we're looking to you for, the buck stops with you, and being able to admit that you don't have all the answers, I think is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. So that was, and I'm still attest to, he's probably he's got a leadership style that I hadn't seen before.
Yep. And
it's one that I'm very comfortable with, and I aspire to, to take some of my learnings from him and some of, what he shared with me, and be able to share it with others.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Mark, being a technology geek, we have to talk about technology at some point in time. Mm-hmm. So I suppose the first question I've got in relation to technology, is there something that you've done over the years from a technology point of view that, once you put it in, it had such an impact, you thought, why didn't we do this sooner? You sort of kicked yourself. Is there an example that you can think of?
I think I've had various successes and failures with technology over the years. Yeah. And to me, technology at its best is when it works and it's simple, it's friendly to use, and it's consistently operating. And that's what, if I look at it in a very simplistic form, to me, if I think about a brand that's done that, is Apple. Yeah. I remember in the early years, I had, when the first PCs were coming out, I had invested in this massive big IBM screen and box, and just bloody using it was just a nightmare. And everything was hard. And then I remember Apple coming out, and then everything just worked. Everything just plugged in from a user perspective. And I really enjoyed that. So for me, technology throughout my career is what works, what is simple. And probably some of the things that stand out is, the early days of being able to SMS pre-arrival guests to say that their room's ready, or that we're looking forward to welcome them. And pre-arrival emails that we'd send out to say, here's the map, looking forward to see you. Can we make any, dinner reservations or whatever for you, for their pre-arrival? So that preempting the guest's arrival by whether it be SMS or whether it be by email, I think was a bit of a game changer.
Yep.
To me, I think also that what I love is being able to measure guest sentiment. And not just when they check out, but throughout their stay.
Of course, yeah.
And that also is great technology, and to be able to have the guests to be able to use technology to be able to let, not only through us ringing them or by us connecting with them, but by us also seeing how their experiences are going, knowing that we can correct their experience whilst it's in-house. And then, and not leaving it to when they're gone, and then actually them have the ability to sledge, their experiences. I think that ability to interact with the guest, to change the course of their experience throughout their stay, I think is really powerful. Definitely.
Is there some technology that you're looking at now, obviously at the start, to improve the guest experience? Sort of what is,
Yeah, and I think as an industry, we're not as progressive as what we should be in this space, and that's that whole online check-in experience.
Yep.
And that digital, get your key to your room.
Yep.
We just, and we're no different at the Star, so like at the Grand, we've got 600 rooms. On a Friday night, we may have 400 check-ins.
Wow.
And unfortunately, we have them all line up, and going up and down the lines to get into their room, and that's such a poor experience. Now, we try to make it a little bit more enjoyable, but we're moving to a space at the moment which we will have the ability to check in online.
Yep.
And then we need to also move more quickly in the space of having the digital key, so you can go straight to your room. You use your phone to get in. You've got that ability to also charge back to your room, all on your phone. Whereas at the moment, we've got that manual check-in process. We go through a rego card still, and then we have to come down and check out. So we're trialing, we're piloting an online check-in process next month.
Yep.
And we're doing that at Star Residences, and then that going well, we'll move to the next step, which will be the digital key.
That's fantastic. That's music to my ears, Mark. It's something I've been telling hoteliers for about 2 years now. It's like the airlines have shown us the way.
That's right.
We need to literally, one of the pushbacks has been that, that traditional check-in is the first contact that the guest has with a hotel. And you can still have that point of contact, but if all the paperwork is done before I arrive, then it's just a conversation like we're having now. It's like, welcome, here's your key. Definitely.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Instead of that transaction, which is what it is. It's just a ugly transaction of, can I get your credit card? Or I've got your credit card, but can you please fill out the guest rego card, sign all these things, and then here's your key. Like, it's just, and you've been waiting in line for 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And we know with airlines, there was resistance at the start, but now, I don't know about you, but when I go to an airport, I don't want to talk to anybody. I've got I've already checked in. I've already got my digital pass to get on the flight.
Yep.
My ticket, and I'm straight on. I'm on. Like, it's so much better. So I think the same with car rentals. Like, they're also behind the times. But I think hotels, we need to pick up pace there. I think the consumer's ready for it.
Definitely.
I think they want it. We just got to make sure again that the technology is intuitive, it works, it's simple. The guest actually doesn't feel upset about the process. Yeah,
it's got to. I think it's, as you said in your very first point, it's got to be easy. It's got to be an Apple type experience.
Yeah.
What I always encourage hotels to do as well is, and this is my personal opinion, I don't think the front desk, in its physical form may disappear, but the need to have somebody greet a guest will always be there. And once again, I hate saying, but the airlines have shown us that, when you go, if you don't know how to do your boarding pass, if you don't know how to use the automated luggage solution, there is someone there that can help you. If you're, great at it, fantastic. And I think that's the way hotels should go as well. There's someone there that you can ask questions, and it may not be, how do you use this? But it's like, I've really got to choose somewhere for dinner tonight. What do you recommend? Or, and I personally think that's what will differentiate us from other forms of accommodation. The fact that we actually have staff that are fully present and engaged with you. Definitely.
Totally agree. So I think that technology and the progress of our industry in this space, I think will move quickly like the airlines did. Once we get, we get hold of it and it works, I think the consumer has already shown that they'll adopt it.
Yep.
But to your point, I think then we have the ability to actually really show genuine hospitality more rather than that transaction.
Definitely. And I was actually writing a white paper at the moment, and one of the things I believe is that I can see technology continuing to be used to eliminate those boring, repetitive and mundane tasks. And that will be, physical robots. They will come into play. It'll be AI technology. it'll be IoT, it'll be bots that, if a guest chooses to SMS a question into you, like what time is check-in, yes, you can have a staff member reply by seeing that message on a dashboard, but, stock standard, very simple to answer questions, technology should be able to say, what do I reply to that guest? Check-in time is 2 p.m. Here's the link to the property. Here's the map. Once again, that frees staff up so that when the guest is physically in front of them, they are interacting rather than responding to text messages, etc.
Yeah. And I think some of the other basic mundane things that we've known about for a long time, we are addressing, like, the digital compendium in rooms.
Yeah.
We're just rolling that out now. And, for many, many years, everyone's been complaining about, how laboursome it is and how it's folders sitting in rooms or crappy versions of it on the TV that's really hard to scroll through and whatever. Like, this digital compendium technology is cool, and it's very intuitive, and it's not expensive really when you take into account the costs involved in updating folders and whatever. So,
exactly.
I think that's a big step forward. And I think the same with in-room entertainment. Over the years, I think guests have become less and less comfortable with paying for movies, $18, $19 for a movie when they've got their own Netflix and whatever. So, a lot of those providers have gone out of business.
Yep.
And then really you're left with those that can not only provide you, movies, but can provide you 90 channels, including sport, and it's become free to guests. And I think guests, are looking for that, not looking to be charged on top for a movie.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of what we call BYOD. So the guest actually wanting to use their own device. As you said, the digital compendium is a classic example. Why can't they have that on their own device even before they arrive at the property?
Yeah.
On premise, they might be at the Star Grand and they're at the pool. If it's an in-room compendium, they can't. They could take it to the pool with them and order things, but it's so much more convenient. And as you said, to the cost, literally when you compare the cost of printed compendiums, you're probably saving money. But then the incremental sales that you can actually have. So we know that the incremental spend is somewhere between 19 and 30%, just because they're ordering digitally.
Yeah. And that's certainly our experience. At Star Resi, since we've rolled it out, we can see the take up in-room dining has jumped significantly by having that technology available. So that's certainly working, and that's great to see, and that eliminates some of that boring, again, basic stuff that we had done for many years in hotels. Yeah,
exactly. From a technology perspective, Mark, how do you keep up to date? There is so many changes. There's a lot of, I suppose, with all technology, there's a lot of noise, whether it's, the metaverse, chat, GHPT, there's been a lot of stuff about that on the news lately. How do you try and keep up to date?
Well, look, a couple of ways. So my role as chair for the Accommodation Association exposes me to more industry, what's going on in industry.
Yep.
Going to the likes of AHIS is great. We tend to see vendors there, and then really just staying in touch with online and what's happening around the globe in regards to technology in other hotels. So really, it's me searching it out and other colleagues, sharing information of what people are looking at, what's being trialed, and some of the results of that. We at Star, we don't want to be the first in market.
No.
But we also don't want to be the last.
No.
So it's and because of we've got such a broad base business. So as we know, our business is predominantly about entertainment. There's obviously a gaming aspect, huge food and beverage, events, and hotels.
Yep.
And so there's lots of different forms of technology across all of those platforms.
Yes.
So for us, it's actually just working out. One is, where do we spend our money? Two is, what does the consumer want? Three is what will it look like, and how do we deploy it? And because we have certain requirements around the gaming aspect, there's cyber and all sorts of other controls that come into it.
Yes.
And so when I'm looking at technology for hotels, I have to contemplate probably a fairly large hurdle to be able to, consider, bringing it into our environment here.
Definitely. I've had interaction with obviously the Star Entertainment Group. We supply personally some products and, that sit on the network. And it is a challenge, but I understand the implications as well. It's not just a traditional hotel. It's well and above and beyond that. And as you said, the cyber requirements are substantial. So,
yeah.
Mark, one quick thing, the team experience these days is just as important as the guest experience. Are there any particular things that you are doing or looking at to improve the employee experience?
Look, I think you're absolutely right. The only way that we actually can provide our guests a great experience is having a team that are engaged.
Yep.
And so over the last couple of years, that's been difficult for all of us.
Yeah.
Because we've seen such a huge departure of people from our industry because there was no work. And so we lost a lot of them. And it's predominantly in food and beverage and for housekeeping for us.
Yes.
And so to attract them back, a lot of them went to retail and to hospitals and health.
Yeah.
To attract them back, we need to provide them, a good environment, an environment that's got some stability, but also an environment that pays respect to them as individuals.
Yep.
What we do here at Star and at each of our locations, and this takes me back to my early years in hotels, was that here we provide all our staff. We've got staff canteens, massive,
yep.
And we've got fully cooked meals included as a benefit to every staff member. Same with uniforms. They arrive, they've got a freshly ironed uniform, they get changed in the change room, wear it, finish their shift, give the uniform back. So I think those sorts of things, whilst they were done many years ago across the industry, I know with Med Group, we did none of that. And we were a very cost conscious and light scaled business. So we didn't offer those sorts of benefits. But here in Star, we do. And so I think that for us to be able to not only attract, but retain talent and people within it, I think we've got to look after them. And I think also we've got to show them opportunities to grow within their careers. And there's a lot of multi-skilling that goes on here. I can see a lot of people that join the Star that might start in one particular division but end up in another.
Yep.
So we've just opened our own academy in this year.
Okay.
And so we're going to continue to invest more in upskilling our people so they can continue not only to grow, but our goal is obviously to keep them within the greater business.
Of course. That's perfect. I think to your point about, meals, it was something that was very common in hotels when I started in the late 80s and 90s. And I think, unfortunately, the accountants sort of looked at the cost of it and it got phased out. But a number of hotels I talked to are actually bringing it back because it is one of those things that you can do to differentiate a hotel from, as you said, an aged care or retail. They're not going to feed you at retail.
No.
And that's great. And I think one of the things I think as an industry we need to do is show people that there is a career path. And you're living proof of that.
You did, right, Brendan. And, there's some great success stories within the Star of people. I know a colleague of mine is GM of a division here. I won't embarrass him by calling him out, but he's been here for 34 years. And he actually worked on this building site to build this originally.
Wow.
And there's lots of people. I see 20-year anniversaries all the time around the property. So, people are staying for a particular reason. And I think that, with what we're doing in Queen's Wharf in Brisbane, we've got arguably, one of the largest developments that is happening in Queensland for many years in Brisbane. It's going to become a destination in itself.
Yes.
we've got the island here where we're spending 2.1 billion as our master plan, and we've got the first tower of 5 being built. And tower 2, we open that end of next year, and we'll have a 5-star hotel. We'll have 450 apartments above it, and then 3 other towers after that. So that will provide. We currently employ 3,000 people on the island today.
Okay.
That will provide significant more rooms as well as jobs.
Yep. That's amazing, and so the island will be a destination in itself as well. So
absolutely. So it'll be to come for entertainment, whether it be gaming, whether it be music, whether it be food and beverage, and then you can stay. You got the Dorset. You got a great 4-star. You're going to have various 5 stars and 6 stars, and then you also have other accommodation. Which we're still working through at the moment. What those brands will be.
That's amazing. Mark, as we get ready to finish up, there's one last question. So if we look at the industry, perhaps 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years from now, what do you think it will look like? And are there any things that you think we should be doing as hoteliers to prepare for the changes that we might see?
I think it goes back to the point we were talking about earlier. I think that the art of genuine hospitality has got to continue to come back. Less transaction and more hospitality. And to me, that's the reason, when I was a kid and I saw my mum and dad work in that motel, and the way my dad and my mum used to speak to people, and that art of genuine hospitality, I think that's got to become more to the front.
Yep.
And have technology handle all of the transactional stuff.
Yes.
So I think as an industry, we've got to continue to move towards that. I'm super excited, with what we're doing here in this country, by way of, the hotels and the brands, and the resorts. And I think, I'd like to see, particularly in Gold Coast, I still think there's a massive missed opportunity without the beach clubs. We need beach clubs. We need to activate our beaches here. And I don't mean like Bali, but I mean like having activated clubs where you pay to play and pay to experience, but you have these beautiful lounges and experiences on our beautiful beaches in certain areas, activated with music and with food. And I think there's a missed opportunity here. And so I'd like to think in these next 5 to 10 years that we start activating some of these spaces. Because, they do it internationally. They do it in Italy. They do it in various parts of Europe. It works so well. And I think that there's some opportunity there. And I think the integrated resorts like here, like Queen's Wharf, where you can come for a big conference, no difference to Marina Bay Sands and those sorts of locations. I think they're going to become more and more important. And I think our investment in people, we've got to continue to invest. And I love the way that armed forces do their drives. You see it on TV and various, join the army or join the Navy and have this incredible careers.
Yes.
I think we as an industry have got to do more of that. Because the tourism and hospitality industry has been incredibly good to me and to a lot of people. And I've loved every part of it. And I think, we've got to attract and show people the sort of careers that they can have in this industry.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was actually talking to Michael Johnson exactly about that. Whatever it is, at the Air Force, advert that they ran. It's like, why can't we as an industry replicate that? Because you can have, a better experience in hospitality. You don't have to go and fight people. It's actually offering service, and you're actually, you're talking to people, you're being a person, and you get paid for it, and you get to move around the world, and you can have a job anywhere.
That's right.
That's the wonderful thing about it. I love it. Mark, thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed learning more about your early career and what's going on at the Star currently with regards to technology. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Brendan. Love chatting to you.
Thank you.